All right, this is the third lecture here covering the architectural piece assignment. This is our third assignment. And so far, everyone's doing good, keeping up. It's a lot to learn how to 3D model in a relatively short period of time. So just hang in there. It'll definitely get easier as we go. But for this one, we're going to make a small architectural piece and we're going to do it a little bit different than what we did last week. So last week we did some modeling, some little objects. Then we did a model unwrap texture. Instead of doing unwrap or modeling, then unwrapping, then texturing, we're going to do the textures first and then apply those to the model. And the textures we create will be repeatable, so you can repeat them across the surface, which is good for architectural models and environmental models like walls and buildings and floors and paths and terrain and things like that. So it's a good workflow to understand and to understand when you would use one versus the other. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started. I have a new Blender file open here. And as always, I just like to delete that stuff. So I have a blank one. Now I know that for this assignment, I'm going to do a well. So wells are little structures. I guess they're kind of architectural to some degree. They have like a little roof and stuff, and it has a round shape and straight shapes, which I think is a good variation to show you some stuff. Um, Also, wells are pretty common for beginner 3D modelers to do. I see them really often in portfolios and stuff. So I think it's just a good place to start. You can do a well if you want to follow along, or if you want to take the techniques I use and apply it to something different, you can certainly do that as well. So remember, you want to do something small and simple. You don't have to do a huge house or a mansion or anything like that. You could just do a well or a shed or a booth or something small, something that doesn't require a ton of detail because we're all about the workflow right now. Um, so with that said, I know that I'm going to have a couple of different textures with a well, like some brick and wood and things like that. So you need a minimum of 3 different textures. And I have some prepared here in Photoshop that I was going to show. So again, I use Photoshop just because I have access to it through my work, but you can use any image editor that you have access to. There's some free alternatives to Photoshop that you can find that work just in a browser or by download. Some of you use Procreate, whatever image editor you want to use is fine. So I have this brick, generic brick. I have this like wood siding that I'm going to use. And then I have this like kind of rusty looking generic wood. So these are the textures I'm going to use for this well. And I found these online, which I'll show you where to find some stuff here in a second. But what you want to do first is when you bring them in, usually you want to kind of like, alter them in some way, especially if you find images or photos, just to make sure they're your own thing. So like I altered the color to give it this kind of rusty looking color. You can do whatever you want to it, but the important thing is to make sure that it is repeatable. So I'm going to go to image size, check the size. So it's a 1024 texture. When you're making textures for games, it's good to do powers of 2 because the game engines use that for rendering and efficiency things that they do. So coming from a games background, it's easy for me just to do a power of 2. So this is 1024, but you could also do 512, 2048, 4096. 4096 is a little too big for what we're doing. Whatever you do, keep the pixels between 1 and 2000 pixels. You don't need huge images for this. So if you want to use the power of 2 rule, that's fine. So 1024, and the reason I want is because I want to go to filter, other, offset. So I'm going to offset at 512, which is half. And you can see that when I do that, I don't get any seams here. So the way offset works is it will take your image and offset it by that number of pixels, like kind of like Pac-Man. If you go off one end and you come on the other. so you get this sort of kind of like look where it brings the sides in the middle. But this one's seamless, so I don't see a good seam here, so that's good. So this one's repeatable. And I know it would be because I've prepared these before for another tutorial, so I'm just kind of reusing them. This one is not, so this is a wood that I found that I altered to be my own. So if you get images from online, make sure you check the size because they're most likely going to be very large. So if I go to image size, yeah, so this is 6,000 pixels by 2,700. This is a huge image. This is way, way, way too big. So I'm actually going to change the image size to 1024 by 512. And I'm going to keep it rectangular just because it's going to be for long wood pieces. So I'm going to click OK. And then it's smaller, so I'm just going to make it bigger a little bit. So here's my wood. I do want to check this repeatable. So for this one, this is going to be wood pieces. Well, let's just offset it anyway before it might work. Let's see. So 512 horizontal and then vertical. So vertical would be 256. And click OK. So you can see this one does not repeat as well. So in Photoshop, there's some things you can do to kind of fix that. There's a you could try the spot healing tool and just kind of go over and see how well it kind of blends the seam. And it kind of works. There's a little bit of a seam here. I'm just gonna like see if I can just take that seam out. So there's a little bit of like a color difference here. Sometimes you can take the clone stamp and so clone stamp allows you to choose like a, I don't know, sample and then paint it elsewhere. So I might grab like some of this lighter color and let's see, is my size too small? There we go. So let me just grab this lighter color, just kind of paint a little bit. In there. So just, it doesn't have to be perfect, just enough so that it doesn't. And I can bring some of this darker over too to kind of make it. So again, it's not perfect. It is it's a little, but it'll probably look good enough. The big seams are gone. It just looks like there's a little more coloration on one side than the other. But I'm still pretty happy with it. So I'll move forward with this one. So I'm just gonna save these, and I like PNGs. So I'm gonna say this is a PNG, and I have a different wood that I'm gonna save over and save generic wood, and then replace it or save it, whatever you want to do. So PNGs are lossless images. So what that means is they don't lose any resolution, and they're relatively small file sizes, and then you can preview them in Windows if you double click and open them. So I like PNGs. So for your textures, if you want to find textures, there's a website called Texture Ninja, which I like. It has a ton of different photo sources here that you can use to download and create textures with. So they have brick and then dirt and then you know, paint, plaster, all kinds of stuff. And you can cut these up and use these, and they work pretty well. So this is a good website to use that I like to use. There are other texture websites out there. So for example, there's one called Polyhaven that comes up often if you search. Polyhaven is also pretty good. So if you go browse textures, they have different stuff. The problem with Polyhaven is they use what's called PBR textures or materials. So a lot of these are, so let me just click on this, let me click on this river rock. So here it has a lot of different images. This is a physically based rendering, which is like the color and the bump and the roughness and all these different textures that gives you this kind of like realistic effect. Now the problem is if you go to just the base color, you get this really kind of washed out base color because it uses these other textures to create the illusion of the bumping and all of the extra detail. We're not quite there yet, so we'll get there when we start doing some more material stuff. But for now, I like Texture Ninja just because these photographs and the photographs have all the detail and stuff right in the base color. And for now, since we're just starting out, we're going to use just base color. So I like Texture Ninja. Um, there's another website called textures.com, which I use. Textures.com is similar, but it costs money. I don't think it's free anymore. And I have a subscription that I use for my company that does that I do like contract graphics for. And I've had it for a while and I got kind of grandfathered in. But yeah, there it is. I think it costs money. So I recommend Texture Ninja because it's free. But there's just some options for you. And you'll just grab these textures, download them, bring them into Photoshop and do what you need to do, and then save them out. Something else I wanted to mention is you can also draw or paint your own textures. So I have this image here that is from a project I did where I made this like black and white game that looks like it was drawn with a pen. So I drew this on, I drew this like black and white image on paper and scanned it in. And then you can use this, something like this too. So I kind of show you the difference between the two, but you can draw and paint your own textures, or you could use photo stuff. Either way, as long as you have something that kind of makes sense. Okay, so once you have your textures prepared, you can move into Blender, and I'll just kind of start modeling the well. So I'm going to start with a cylinder. Let's do 24. And actually the size probably fine. So right now my origin, that little orange dot is in the center. I'm just gonna go to edit mode and go into face mode, tap L. Remember L will select everything. And I noticed in the last video that I don't have the keyboard stroke add-on on this computer. It's on my other one. So I apologize for that. The little thing that shows the keys I'm pressing. It's an add-on that you can get for Blender, and I'll get it all. I have Blender 4.0 now, and I haven't got some of the add-ons didn't carry over. But anyway, so here's my cylinder for my well. I did kind of Google well just to have a couple of images, but just to kind of look at. There's tons of different kinds of wells, but just to get an idea of like what I want to do. It's always good to find a reference just to give you an idea of where to start with your well. But I kind of like that one. I have like the more traditional brick, like more like this or this, but I do like how that looks with the roof and stuff. Also, mine kind of looks like this as well with the roof and the stuff, but let's get some reference. So I'm going to minimize that. So this looks size-wise looks okay. With this method, I like to texture as I go. So again, it's a little different. So right now I could just kind of start texturing right away. And what I'm going to do is I have my cylinder. I'm going to go to the material, click new, and call this little m for material, and then brick, and then go to base color, go to image texture, go to open, and just find the well, and generic brick, open. And then, so the texture won't show up until you turn it on in your viewport settings. So click there, texture. I like to do matte cap because it gives you some better shading in your viewport. And there you go. So for my well, I'm never going to see the bottom. I'm just going to delete it. So it's going to be stuck into the ground. And then for the top, I'll also delete the top. So I'll just have this kind of open thing. And then I'm going to select L to select everything. And then I'm gonna right click. I'm sorry, let's go to face mode, right, or object mode. Right click, shade auto smooth, and let's do like 45, and we'll just see how this goes. So I'm gonna I have the texture on here, so let's go to UV editing, and then I'm gonna turn texture mode back on. So matte hat texture. So there it is. I'm gonna select the polys. So you can see now how it's UV mapped, right? It's only using half of the texture, which I wanted to use all of the texture here. So I'm just gonna increase this. I'm scaling, so use I tapped S, but you can also choose scale here. And it looks like it's about half, so I'm gonna scale it up. And then I'm gonna do 2. And then I'm going to move it down. And it fits just almost perfectly like that. Now this is what I was talking about repeating, right? So now you can see how it goes outside. Oops, sorry. You can see how it goes outside of the square, which is fine. And when it does that, it just repeats the texture. So this texture here, think of it as a grid that just infinitely repeats around. So if I go from top to bottom, it'll stop at the top and the bottom, you can see here, and then the sides will just kind of wrap around and repeat. So if you have a nice repeatable texture, you can see it repeats nicely across the surface like that. So again, this is good for architectural pieces and stuff. And you can get like, you can get more resolution out of your textures than if you try to cram everything into this one image. So from here, you could, let's see if I can add a little more detail to it. So I'm going to select the top, go to face mode, select the top. So I'm going to tap E for extrude and then tap S and then kind of pull it in like that to create the little thickness of the bricks here. And from here, maybe I'll pull it a little more. I'm going to extrude it down so I can create the inside of the well. So I wanted to actually take this opportunity to show another tool here, and it's snapping. So in Blender, if you want to do something exact, like I want this to extrude the same amount, the same height as the well itself. So I want it to snap here. Now you can kind of like extrude it and then tap Z. So it extrudes on the Z axis, which is up and down. And you could kind of eyeball it, right? You could extrude it down. You could go here to X-ray and you can move it up and sort of like get it to match. If you know how tall your thing is, you could actually exactly type it in and that would be fine. It doesn't have to be exact. But just to show you something, I'm going to go here, go to snapping and do vertex and then click the little magnet to turn it on. So what that means now, if I move this, you can feel it snapping to these different vertices, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to E for extrude, tap Z, so it goes on the Z, up and down Z axis, come down. And if I hover over one of these vertices on the bottom, it'll snap to it, and then just click. So what happens is when you do a Z, when you tap like an axis like Z, it'll keep it on that Z axis. And then once you get to a vertex, it'll snap it to the same Z as that vertex. And then now you can see I have the inside modeled. So I'm just going to go to face mode and select these faces. Now what I did is I clicked and held Alt and it selected the ring on the inside. Go to UV editing. So there it is there. So you can see it didn't quite. So since I extruded it, it's kind of like infinitely flat. Actually, I wonder if I can. If I could do. Let's see if this works. Okay, this is kind of a fancy method, but let's see if we can get it to work. So the why it's stretched is because all the UVs are like just stacked right here. They're all like scrunched up, right? So what I want to do is see if I can grab the edge and pull it down on the image. Um, so you could just do this and tap. Let's see, I don't really have a seam. So I could grab a seam. I don't know where the seam is for that one. Let's see, is it there? So if you wanted to match, see how I'm clicking and it's clicking over here. So I have the sync on so I can see both at the same time. I'm just trying to find where that seam actually is. It might be here. Yeah. Okay, so that's what the seam is. So I'm just gonna click and do mark seam. And you could select the inside and you could do U unwrap. And then you have to kind of fix it because it did it sideways. So rotate it 90 degrees using R or the rotate tool. And then here you could go to move it over, put it on 0. Okay, that's not what I want. I'm going to pull this little arrow here and I'm going to put this right on 0, 0 so that it's, okay, let's do 0.5 so it's in the middle of the square. There we go. That's what I want. Again, you don't have to do it this way. I'm just kind of doing it just because I am. And then scale it up. And then you could scale it by 2, which is the other one. Actually, you could do it a little more. So it matches. It's not going to be perfect because it's not as big. So since it's inset, it's actually a little bit smaller than the outside. So now I have the inside and outside unwrapped, UV mapped, and that works. So that's kind of like using the method that we used before. So let me see if I can undo all the way back. Hopefully, yeah. Okay, so now I'm all the way back where I was. I'm going to select that, right click, clear seam. So now it's the way it was. So now instead, I'm going to see if I can just find this edge and just pull it down. So I'm going to hold Alt and select that edge on the bottom. So it's going to select the edge, which is sort of exactly in the same spot as that. And I'm just going to pull it down. In here, you can also turn on vertex snapping. And again, I'm just, we can do it. You can do it the simple way if you want to. I'm just showing you different stuff that you could add to your toolbox if you want. So now I pulled that down. So now it matches and that works. I might be able to do the same thing for the top. So I grab the top edge and I pull it down, or I could pull it up and then get it to fit that first row of bricks. And then now I have kind of that shape, right? So that's pretty cool. So kind of like unwrapping to the image, and now I have a well that's pretty well unwrapped. So also, let's see if I can look at my reference. I kind of want to do like this style. I like where it's kind of on the outside and then there's the roof. So I'm gonna go to add mesh cube and I'm just gonna do G for move and then Y, take my snapping off. And this thing is huge. I'm gonna shrink it way down. Probably like just that big. And then G and Y to move it over. Again, I'm using shortcut keys. You could use this move tool if you want. But I do recommend shortcut keys because it definitely speeds up. So tab into edit mode, select that bottom vertex. Actually, no, I'm going to keep it in case I want to duplicate it. So what I'm doing is, so when you're moving this thing, and let's say you want to snap to like a front view to kind of line stuff up, if you hold Alt while you're orbiting, you can do that as well. And that helps. So select that G, C, come up, kind of on the ground. And then I'm going to select, that might still be too big. That's a pretty thick piece of wood. Do a little smaller. It's probably good. Tab. 3. All right, so I'm just gonna pull that face up. Let's move it up. Something like that. And I'm just guessing. So there's that. And I'm just gonna have these two wooden kind of pillars and then the roof kind of like on top of that. So for this, I'm going to put my material on that. So material, new, little m, I'm just gonna call it wood, and then base color, image texture, open, well, generic wood, open. So there's my generic wood. Okay. So this is definitely not UV mapped well. So let's go to UV editing and see what the situation is. So the default UV maps for this is really rough. It's just kind of like that. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'm gonna try this way first and see how it goes. So I'm gonna select the inside edge here and make that a seam. And then I'm gonna select around the model like that. And then I'm gonna unwrap that. So now I get this nice straight unwrap where it broke it apart there. And then over here, so rotate, right? Rotate. I can also tap R and then 90 if you want to be quick. And I'm gonna take this snapping off. And then just kind of resize it to fit the wood. Now again, remember we made the wood repeatable, so it should repeat pretty well. And you can see it looks pretty good. Acceptable, I would say. So there's that one wood piece. The top and the bottom are probably fine. You can see they kind of turned out all right. So I'll just kind of leave those that way. Go back to layout. So now since that's textured, if Shift D for duplicate, and then just kind of move that to the side. So now I have two of them. When you're doing the method of like using repeatable textures and repeatable elements and things like that, it's always good to try to mitigate obvious repetition. So you can see this is obviously the same piece. It has the same little landmark here. It does not. And it's obviously the same thing. So sometimes what I'll do is like if I want to copy that and kind of reuse it, I'll just rotate this. So I'll tap R for rotate and then on the Z axis, and then maybe just like 90 degrees. Just that so that when you're looking at it, it doesn't look like the exact same piece of wood. Yeah, cool. So there's that. Let me look at my so let me look at my picture again. Yeah, that one doesn't really tell me a whole lot of how it's actually built. It looks like it's just kind of in there. I'll just kind of guess. It's probably fine. So what I'm going to do is I'll just kind of guess on how it's built and just see how that goes. So I'm going to Shift D and pull this up, and then R, rotate this -90, and then just kind of do it this way. Oh, I got kind of wonky there. Yeah. Let's see, let's rotate on the X. And -90. See, where did that? There we go. And so I'll just kind of put that up there and just kind of stack it. So you can see how I'm kind of like, and you can kind of model this way too, like if it makes sense. So I saw that some of you in your first assignment were trying to like model everything so it's like an extrusion, but it doesn't have to be. You can kind of do elements and kind of stack them up. It's totally fine to do that. And if it works, it works. I'm trying to think of like how this would be built. I think these need to be taller, but I don't want to spend a ton of time making this like super accurate structure. So what I might do is maybe I'll just kind of move on and we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to do another cube and move this up. This is going to be like the kind of roof structure. So I'm going to scale it and something kind of like that. Scale it on the X. So this will be like the little roof. And I'll probably kind of make a little bit of headway on this and then end the video because it's starting to get kind of long. So this is the roof and right now it's kind of a box. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of the bottom and then I want the top to be pinched like a, you know, like a roof shape, like some pitch to it. So one way you can do it is you could scale and you could pull this in and you could do it this way. So I'm just scaling that top polygon and that works pretty good. It gives you kind of like a nice little a little area, excuse me, on top. That would be pretty accurate, right? So that kind of works there. I'm gonna add another texture to this thing here. And I'm going to go to, I'm gonna move it up too. I'm gonna have it kind of sit on this like that. So I'm gonna go to material, new, do M, and then do wood planks. And then go to base color, and then go to image texture, and then open up that. So I think it's called siding. I was using it for siding. So there we go. And then I'll just kind of UV map this to work. So I'll select this. Actually, let's do these first. Let's do this and this. Let's go to UV editing and see how it looks. Not great. So I'll just do U unwrap. And it did this kind of weird thing here. So here's another way you can unwrap too. So I select these and these. Now, if I snap my camera, so it's a flat view, I could do U, and then I could do project from view. And what that does is it gives me a flat UV map of what my camera's looking at. So now these are kind of flat, straight on. And then in here, I can scale it up to be as big as I want. And I kind of want it to match up so that it, excuse me, so that it ends and starts on some of these planks. So I think this actually looks pretty good. I might grab these top points here. So go to, hang on. So actually I turned off UV syncing. So when you're working with points, usually you want to turn that off because if I don't, it's going to want to mess with other points. So I'm going to turn that off and I'm just going to move this down so that it ends at the top of that texture like that. So now I have that. And I'm going to do the same thing for these. I'm going to try to do the project from view trick again. So here, project from view. There we go. That works pretty good as well. And I'm going to scale these up so that it's using more of the bottom parts. Let's see, move it up. So this is pretty much the process. There really isn't anything else new about this process. Grab that top. I'm just going to unwrap this top piece and then rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to have this just be on top of one of these pieces here. And then scale it up a little bit. So that takes up this little plank. So it's a little different process, but you can see I'm just kind of matching things up, right? And it looks looking pretty good. The only thing here is so the roof looks weird. I'm kind of reaching the end of the time that I allotted for this video. So I'm just going to kind of summarize what I would do next. So here it's looking pretty good. I would want more structure inside this to make more sense. Right now it doesn't make much sense the way it's kind of put together and the way this is just kind of textured here. Um, I might actually, I don't know if it would be better to maybe like even inset these, this part here, perhaps. And then I would put that generic wood on the edge as it's kind of like framing. So here's how you can do that too. So select it, go to the materials. So I already have the generic wood in here. So I just need to click a new material. And I don't need to make a new one because I have it right here. So all my materials in Blender already show up. So I'll just choose wood and then click assign. And it will put it on the, I don't know. I don't know if I like that. I don't think that looks good. Yeah, I'm not sure what I would do here. Um, I might look at some image because I don't like the roof. I don't like how the roof looks. Um, yeah, so the roof is like, you know, kind of like that. Let me undo that. Let's see. So a lot of times modeling is trial and error. Um, so I'm gonna completely separate this from the whole piece. So I'm gonna select these, tap Y on the keyboard. And what Y does is it will break them apart. So now they're broken. So that does is it allows me to select these pieces. And then I'm just going to scale those on the Y so that they're overhang a little bit like that. And that already is starting to look a little better. And then, so I might like do like some more structure too. Maybe like duplicate this for the top roof piece, scale it on the X to kind of pinch it in a little bit. So it looks like the roof is kind of attached to this plank piece. Probably scale that out. So you can see you can get pretty like organic, I guess. And you can just kind of go for it. Oops. So I might kind of pull that down. So there's like, it looks like there's some structure. I probably put some pieces inside of here as well so that it's built up in a way that makes sense. So that might look something like, you know, you could reuse this again, which is pull that. So you could probably build some kind of box structure here. So if you want to get really messy too, you could even kind of move this in. So you can see like now I'm starting to just kind of like build it out, and I don't like things not to look good, so I'm starting to get a little obsessed with how it looks, which isn't a bad thing, but I do need to end the video. And then rotate this up. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? Just kind of build it out the way that it would make sense. That doesn't make sense. This would probably be connected here, right? Yeah, it's getting a little messy. Okay, so let's rotate on the Y. You can even snap it. And then tab, face mode, grab that face, move it in. But anyway, so, and then move this up. Yeah. So you see how I'm build like the inside of the wood structure there. And then I would have my piece here. So yeah, so you would just be building it out and trying to make it look a little more convincing than it is. Something else I would do is I would go to the roof itself. And so I would extrude it up. So extrude, then S to extrude it up to give it a little more thickness. Or I would go to edge mode, then add some edge loops. So you could add an edge loop, like, for example, right there, and kind of get them to match up with the textures. And I'll show you why in a second. You don't want to do this every single spot because it can get a little tedious. But if you put them strategically, you could get the move tool and you can move the edges out slightly. And you can get some nice silhouette that way. So you get a little bit of a 3D effect there, which looks good, which mixed with your other kind of like wood structures, you know, and this isn't finished by the way, so don't judge too hard, but you can kind of see the process of how you might go about building it this way. So just experiment with adding different textures, making different textures, and creating your little structure here. And hopefully this is helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.